Okay, so this is for topic 10. Topic is human-computer interaction and people in IS. So there's really two separate pieces we're going to talk about here. First part, we're going to be talking about kind of the roles and people, what people do in IT. And then the second part is going to be talking about human-computer interactions. Okay, so there's really, the idea of information systems is really, there's people that really are involved all through it. You don't really having an information system without people does not really occur. All right, so basically, people are the ones who imagine it, they develop it, they support it, and they use it. All right. So the question is whether it's useful to these users. But that's once again that becomes a fundamental challenge. The investments in technology may or may not be useful. So the idea of being able to properly align the people who are doing the imagination, developing, supporting, and using of IS is important because it's not necessarily automatic that you will get one from the other. So I guess the first part would be this idea of designing and building information technology. So this is a whole bunch of roles that are out there. So there's different types of, there's systems analysts who really are the ones who do a lot of design work. Programmers are the people probably well known that actually write the computer code. And there's other people, there's other roles that are out there as well, hardware, software engineers, systems engineers, network engineers, all have a role. A lot of this stuff tends to be very specialized. So you don't necessarily have somebody who's a programmer is not necessarily going to be have the ability to be a network engineer or a hardware engineer for that matter. From an IT operation, so that's kind of this part right here is your kind of design and build. This piece is how you run it. So this is the run side of things. So a couple of the different folks we see in this spot, the operators. Probably we're seeing a lot less operators these days. A lot more and more stuff is becoming more and more automated. So there's a lot fewer operators required. Database administrators, who actually you can see database administrators being in the kind of the create side as well. All right, so it doesn't necessarily. I mean, it's clearly there's an operation side of the database administration, but there's also a development side of it too. Help desk and support folks are the ones that are in the front line, basically answering questions and providing support to folks, and then trainers are the ones who do actually the support, basically training people on what the technologies can do and be able to get the best possible advantage from it. From a management layer. All right, so the top person in an organization, the one you always remember, this is the CIO, is usually the head of the information technology in most organizations, and what their job is to align the plans and operations of IS with the organizational goals, strategic organizational goals. So this person isn't not necessarily the best technologist, not the senior technologist. Probably as much as important to be a business-focused person as it is to be a technology person or a good manager. Great CIOs are great managers, great people managers, rather than just simply being great technology people. We're functional managers, so the entire IT organization is a structure like any other organization with functional managers, project managers. Information security is kind of an interesting piece because in a lot of organizations, information security is actually in some places they actually separate it out, so it doesn't come under the CIO. It actually comes under a different organization, aligned with auditing. So the idea is that role really defines the policies for the organization and make sure that define them, implement them, oversee them, and evaluate on an ongoing basis. So the ISO or CISO, they have a responsibility of protecting everything that's out there. So that's when hardware, software, everything that's tied into that's a technical infrastructure. They have a responsibility for protecting that. So career paths, a lot of different jobs in IT. So I think it's still listed as one of the best, still a growing area. Technical stuff, your programmer, database administrator. roles have been around a while. It changes. Things have changed though. So basically, the things that programmers do now are probably a little bit different than what it was done back before. Ultimately, you're writing a programmer writes code, but what they write on and how they write it and what they do with it has changed. All right. You're seeing a lot of things like hybrid types of things. So you people who have both business schools or business skills and technical skills. The idea of being able to operate on both sides comfortably. Uh, Management track, the ability to move up the organization, become a CIO or ISO or functional managers. Basically, you usually see a career path. One of the challenges, though, there's really has always been kind of a divide between the technical side of things and the business side of things. So technical folks tend to be, you get to a certain point, and there was always pressure for them. Well, if you want to keep going, if you want to keep moving ahead in your career, you need to jump over into the business side. But good technical people do not automatically become good administrators by themselves. So some people can, but ideally, you want them to do what they're doing best. So a lot of organizations have gone through and have tried to develop some alternative approaches to really kind of keep technically focused people on technical tracks and not necessarily automatically make them managers. So it's been an ongoing kind of an ongoing activity. So we're talking about certifications. So certification uh, basically, as we describe it here, a designation by a certifying body and an individual has acquired a specific level of knowledge in its specific technical areas. A lot of certifications are technical or really technically focused. They actually are created by the manufacturer. So like Microsoft has a certification program, and VMware has a certification program. Oracle has a certification program. And then there's some broader ones that are like focused on security, like ISC Squared is responsible for security, and then PMI is responsible for administering PMP, which is Project Management Professional. So basically, the advantage of it is it kind of gives you, to some degree, it gives you the idea that you have the individual being hired has some. You've been able to pass the test, so obviously they have some skills. So the question is, it can provide basic skills. It doesn't necessarily automatically guarantee that a person knows everything about things. And you've had kind of a swing in the business between, a demand for people have to be certified versus saying, well, if you already have expertise, why do you need to be certified in it? So that's kind of this kind of ebbs and flows as technology evolves and things move along. So this is a national cybersecurity workforce framework. It is a model which has been put together primarily to try to, meet the need for qualified, trained cybersecurity folks. Right. One of the big deficiencies that's out there is that there's not enough cybersecurity people, not enough qualified cybersecurity people to provide adequate protection, especially when more and more things are becoming, connected into computers, and the vulnerabilities of computers are becoming more and more manifest. So this is a model that was assembled, that was kind of developed. That okay, these are the types of things that somebody needs to have this skill to be able to do. A cybersecurity professional would have the ability to do different dimensions. So I said this is kind of a high level model that was put out there as a proposal for it. Now you have things like, for example, like CISSP, which is a security certification, which has different domains where you have to, person has to be able to demonstrate expertise in like 6 or 7 different security domains in order to be certified. But this is kind of, so that's been around a while. So this is kind of I think kind of a variant of that, or maybe a little bit of a different twist. I want to focus more on much more on maybe modern cybersecurity workforce. And this is just some roles of different things, kind of along that lines of what you want to be able to do, or different areas you can be involved with security. A lot of these things like requirements planning. So some of these things are more tied into applications. So like right here, Systems requirements planning, test and evaluation is actually more on the application side, more so than like network security. So, and then you've also got your systems development here as along that with the what we call the SDLC, systems development lifecycle. Some other career within the operate and maintain area. Um, Data administration, knowledge management. We've talked about that before, especially knowledge management, network services, systems administration, basically keeping things running, being able to understand how things operate. Also, system security analysis, and then protect and defend. This is a particular area of, a particular focus area for security to be able to is tied. Protect and defend is a lot of it's tied into like networking, network security. Because what happens is networking, the network probably, when everything is connected together, then basically that also is that is your major um, is a major focus area that has to be protected. All right, so this is some focus areas, some career areas that really need to be. If you want to be in this area, these are areas you might want to focus on or look at. Also, kind of when that's investigation, digital forensics and investigation. This actually is interesting. This area here is interesting. The ability to come in after the fact, after an attack has happened, be able to go and collect the information, analyze it, preserve it, and then be able to develop an analysis of what happened ex post facto. Oversight and development career areas, kind of a couple different areas here. We see information security operations, security management program, CISO. This is actually kind of your path that would get you to the highest level. Strategic planning. Now, organizational efficiencies. One of the things that's interesting is a couple different. IT organizations can be organized in any number of ways, and what happens is once it's established one way, then what happens is there's usually a tendency for it to go back into another direction. So you have things like a centralized IT organization, you have developmental IT organizations. There's whole area. There's the concept of centralization versus decentralization of IT has been something that's been evolving and re-evolving over time. The second you get everything centralized, then there's a spin to put everything decentralized, and then vice versa. All right. One of the things that is over the past, I'll say 20 years, you've seen is outsourcing. This idea of outsourcing can be, and it really can be used for different types of things. And the idea is that organization would say, rather than basically hiring all the people I need to be able to keep all the technology I need running, what I'll do is I'll contract it out to another organization that has specific expertise, and then they'll just we'll pay them a fee for that. Outsourcing's been an interesting history, because what happens is there's been a real ebb and flow of you've had a lot of organizations went to outsourcing and had some success. Other organizations did outsourcing and spectacularly bad. And a lot of times you see organizations are kind of going back and forth. Sometimes they're outsourcing stuff and they're bringing it back in house, and they're outsourcing another piece of it. So it's always been a kind of a dynamic going back and forth. One of the things we've seen is that there's certain areas that tend to have a lot of more success with outsourcing than others. So things like security is something you probably don't want to outsource. You probably want to keep an internal security organization. But things like help desk is something it seems to be pretty straightforward to be able to outsource it. So here's kind of a model. They call it, this is a line around types of users, but it's also used for types of companies as well. So the idea is you have people who or organizations that are like innovators, that are like the first people on the bleeding edge of technology, the first ones to do it. There's good in that you get to work with some new cool stuff. Bad news is you also get to discover all the problems with it. So you always innovation is always it's a double-edged sword. So early adopters are kind of the people who come along afterwards, after the innovators have kind of resolved a lot of the bugs. You get organizations or people who are early adopters. Then majority, you kind of move along. as things kind of move along, as something moves from kind of lower and kind of as you usually it's transitioning into a new, replacing something that's already out there. So you get early and late majorities. And then once again, you always have laggards, and laggards are, the reality is, what will happen is there'll be some piece of the operation that you want to migrate, but it can't, and all of a sudden it'll be 10 years will be passed, and you have everything is new, but you still got this one piece of something that's still out there, and nobody knows what to do about it. So the other area we talked around, so that's really the organizational stuff. All right, so this is from a human-computer interaction, or we say HCI. It's basically how people interact with computer technology. So this is really a science in its own area, in its own field. Organizations were really into this. Microsoft back in the 80s and 90s, as the PC was moving forward and moving into Windows, was very big into it. Apple has been hugely into it. In large part, the success of like the iPhone was really based upon the work they did, understanding what people, basically how people would use the system, be able to learn it without necessarily having to, go to be fully trained in it, be able to, take advantage of things like cognitive models to be able to define all that stuff. It doesn't happen by accident. So the success of the iPhone and why it's successful was not because they were just lucky. They did a lot of work to get that. How people were able to interpret visual and cues in different ways. So this is actually as I said, a field of science, or a field of endeavor around that. As time has gone on, there's been a lot of learnings on it. So right now there's, like, as they call it, 8 golden rules of interface design. So the idea is, if you're developing an application, what you want to do is make sure that, whatever you're developing, your interface, basically how the person would interact with the system, would be, you take all of this stuff into consideration in order to be successful. One of the big challenges, though, with human-computer interaction is it's been difficult to develop a highly effective human-computer interactions that is also very secure. What happens is, a lot of times, security has traditionally been something that has been almost like an afterthought. It's never been an intrinsic. It's tied to the intrinsic design of something that it probably needs to be. All right. And what happens is, as we've come back in and have gone back to retrofit systems to make them more secure, sometimes the security stuff kind of is perceived as stuff as getting in the way. It's like, say, we'll use an example of passwords. An organization go out and say, okay, we're going to put a new rule for passwords. It's going to have to be a 20-letter password with with X number of uppercase characters, X number of lowercase characters, X number of special characters, with no repeats and what happens is, it's hard for people to remember all that stuff. So what will happen is, it's not easy for them to be able to. Human-computer interaction on that is, you have to be able to remember that stuff and be able to key it in. So invariably, what will happen with things like that is that people will write it down, and they'll write their long password with all the stuff. They'll write it down, and they'll put it put it on a sticky over their desk, which basically blows up the entire security. So the idea is be able to make things secure, but also not lose sight of the human impact on it, and making sure that it's easy enough to use. It does not get in the way. So and so we say here, security goal to ensure undesirable actions and systems are prevented and mitigated, can complement usability goal to minimize unintentional errors. But it has to be designed. This is all design stuff. This has to be designed in. It doesn't happen accidentally. So this is just a model here of security usability threat model, of kind of a formal model, kind of describing that. How do you design something that is easy to use and intrinsically secure? All right. And that is it for this section.